Hello there YouTube, it's Colormo with another video tutorial on my Logic Pro X tutorial series season 2. I'm gonna be continuing my line of talking about synths of Logic Pro X. So I'm gonna be talking about the ES1 today. This could be a little bit more complicated, a little bit more confusing, so I'm gonna try to make it as simple as possible. That's why I'm calling it an intro, just like the ESM. Instead of going into every little detail and tech of every option that we have, I'm just gonna explain what each does, give a very quick example, and that way when I do a separate video in the future with more in-depth, then you would know what I'm talking about. So just this more intro of the concepts that introduce this synth. So I'm gonna try to keep it a little bit shorter than that it would normally be for something of this magnitude. But before I do that, I just wanted to mention that make sure that if you want to participate in the current open round of the giveaway, that you have this video as your last chance to participate in that round. And if you're not a subscriber, then subscribe and comment. If you already are subscribed and you want to participate, please leave a comment on this video or any of the previous videos of this round of the giveaway, which is a $20 Amazon gift card. The winner is going to be announced this Sunday. Yes, I said in a previous video that was going to be the 17th, but my usual schedule of doing these videos is on Sundays, except today, which was a crazy weekend, so I had to do it on a Monday. Sorry about that. So without further ado, let's jump right into Logic Pro. Let's not waste any time. I already have the ES1 synth in track number 1. In track number 2, I just have the ESM in case I need to open it up and cross-reference it. And on track number 1, I also have a channel EQ just in case I need to cross-reference that as well. If you don't know how to add an instrument, I'm gonna add another track. You just go into, if you have already an open session, you go to instrument and you can select from your drop down. Already have the stock software instruments, so I'm gonna undo that. And yeah, the ES1. So the ES1, it's nothing more than a subtractive synth, similar as the ESM. I didn't explain this when I did the ESM tutorial. What subtractive synthesis means is that I am cutting off or filtering out a waveform that I am creating with these oscillators, right? So I'm gonna create a different shape by cutting off portions of it and boosting it, or doing much more to it, processing it based on these options that I have here. So the ESM does the same thing. I thought that was important to mention, so I wanted to bring it up here before I did any more tutorials where I'll mention in that. So that's the basis of many of the synths in Logic Pro, and you're gonna see as we go into the more difficult or more different synths that all of these concepts apply as well, and it's gonna become less complicated and you're gonna get a hang of it quicker. When you open a different synth, you're gonna see like, okay, so I have more controls of one variant and less of others, so it's kind of the same deal as you move along to the different synths. So I just wanted to put that statement out there. So I'm gonna do is I'm gonna talk about, to keep it in an overview form, we're gonna talk about from left to right, top to bottom, what we have, what's similar to the ESM, what's new, and then obviously run a few examples with this MIDI information that I have here, but just very quickly, right? Not into too much depth of what each combination, because there's, as you can see, there are so many combinations that you can come up with, and then you can automate all of these controls as well. So that gives you so many possibilities that it's impossible to do in just one video. So before I keep talking about what's old and what's new, I'm just gonna play what I have 2 times. This is 2 bars, and with so many information that, as you can see, I try to cover different velocity ranges because our controls are a lot or heavily influenced by the pitch and by the velocity of each note. So that's what's gonna make our synth do its job. So I'm gonna play it and let it cycle twice and then come back. So I don't know if you noticed right away that just what I said, when I have a higher velocity note, the sound is changing, right? There's with my default settings of the ES1, there's a resultant sound that's being affected by the velocity, right? So that I guess I hope that that concept and that thought is already established in your brains after repeating it a few times. So going from left to right, what we have overall, similar to the ESM, overall we have our oscillator parameters, we have our filter parameters, we have our amplifier parameters, which it's different from the ESM, but in the ESM we called it volume. Here we call it amplifier. It's kind of the same deal. It deals with the level that's being affected by the velocity of the notes. And then new things that we have is this modulation parameters down here, and then our envelope parameters, which is more if you haven't seen my sample beats tutorial series, if you look at my ESX24 tutorial, you're gonna see these guys here, this modulation envelope parameters. But then moving on, then we have down here our global parameters, which, as I said in the beginning, this is an instrument, so that instrument has a set of global parameters that is gonna further affect what you already did using your other parameters that compose the synth. And with that, let's go into what my oscillator parameters have for options here. So we first have our 2 to 32 buttons, which is nothing but the pitch, same as the ESM. And I'm gonna bring up the ESM and leave it side by side. So this is my pitch buttons, which as you can see, already a difference here. I only had 3 in the ESM. I have 5 in the ES1, so I have more control over my pitch. And there's still by feet, and if you wanted more information on about why it's called that way, check my ESM video. It's just kind of weird, and I'm not gonna explain it again. We have our oscillator knobs, which are called in Logic Pro wave and sub. I would call them 1 and 2. I just so it doesn't confuse you. So you have your oscillator 1, oscillator 2. In the ESM, we only had 1 waveform. We could mix it, or we can choose one or the other, right? And instead of going more to the right, I'm just gonna make a little deviation and mention the glide, which is exactly the same as what we have in the ESM. It makes the same function. I have my mix slider, which is same as this, right? I can select different waveforms, 1 and 2, and then mix them however I want. All the way up I will only have oscillator 1, all the way down would be oscillator 2. Then we move to our filter parameters. So that it's also analogous to the ESM, but we have much more options here in our filter, right? We still have a cutoff and a resonance. You should be familiar with that by now from the ESM. with the caveat that I made in the beginning about subtractive synthesis. So our slope buttons, which is in the ESM, our filter had our cutoff had a slope of 24. Here we have 4 buttons. So these classic ones are just that, right? It's just like similar to the ESM. This fat one is a one that's gonna boost the low end, because when we put the resonance all the way up, we pretty much lose a lot of the low end. And moving to the right, I have a key slider, which is new. So this is just gonna affect the effect that the keyboard pitch has on the filter cutoff frequency. So it's like a key tracking. So this is what you do when you set the slider all the way to the maximum. The filter is just gonna follow the pitch, and then there's gonna be a constant relationship between the cutoff frequency and the pitch. So that's gonna make a similar result to many of acoustic instruments, where the higher notes are gonna sound brighter tone and in higher pitch, and the lower notes are gonna sound lower. But when you set it all the way to 0, then the cutoff frequency is not gonna change no matter what, and then the lower notes are gonna sound a little bit brighter than the the higher notes. So I missed the drive, which was here, right? But this is also kind of new. It's just in simple terms, it's just gonna affect the volume more than anything. And this is all before the waveforms are being processed by the filter. In the ESM, we had overdrive, but the overdrive was at the very end once the waveform was processed through the filter. So that's kind of how you can compare the two of them. Now we go to the amplifier parameters, and this would be the equivalent to the volume in the ESM, but notice that it's much more different because it's being affected by this guy here, which is the envelope, which is what these buttons here are telling you. This is much different from the ESM, where we only had decay and you didn't have attack, sustain, or release, which are these 4 guys here. And look at my ESX24 sampler instrument tutorial in my sample beat series for more information on this, if you don't know what these means or this is something new for you. So in my amplifier settings, I'm just gonna be modifying the level, and that level is going to be affected by the velocity of the different notes. So this is the slider that will control the amount of how much the velocity is going to affect the filter. And notice that we have already seen these 2 type of open sliders, right? Open and closing sliders. And I'm gonna come back to it when I run through the overview and explain to you what those mean, but it's very simple. So something new here as well. It's like I said, tied to the envelope. These buttons here are just gonna tell you what parameters from this modulation envelope are gonna be tied to the level. So when you have ADSR, you have all of them available to affect these amplifier, which in turn is going to affect the filter based on the velocity. And then A gate R would be using A and the attack and the release, and then gate R would only be using the release or the release is the only one that's going to affect everything. And now we're going to go down here into our modulation parameters, which is something completely new that we don't have in the ESM at all. So I'm going to close that ESM. And the first thing we have here is our low frequency modulator. Then those parameters are gonna be used to modulate other ES1 parameters, right? So you can it's tied to this router, which is your other parameters are gonna be affected by the LFO. So I'm gonna be modulating any of these when I introduce the LFO, and this is nothing new. You have, again, different waveforms that I can use and different frequencies that I can target, and then the different parameters that can be modulated. Right now the pitch would be modulated with the default options, but I can also do any of this. But I'm gonna come back to some of these other parameters before I explain a little bit more about this. So the router is what's gonna enable what parameter is gonna be modulated by the LFO, and then two of these are only affected by this modulation envelope, which is just a dedicated control, right, to these two parameters here, the filter FM and the LFO amplitude. That's just going to control the LFO level, right, using decay or attack, which is in this area here, right, in my modulation envelope. So pretty much all of that's new, right? So from there, I'm just gonna briefly talk about the overall global parameters. So from here, the glide is one of the global parameters, but I already explained what that does. And then our tune field is just gonna tune the instrument in sense, so you can fine tune it a little bit better. Then your analog field is going to change the pitch of each note at the cutoff frequency slightly and randomly. So this is just like a randomizer of that parameter. It's the default is set at 30. You can go up and down. Then the bender range field is just going to set the sensitivity of your pitch bender in semitones, which is you should have that in your, if you have a MIDI instrument, it's just going to be not the modulation wheel, the one that can go up and down and stay there, would be the one that you can move up, but then if you release it comes back to the center. I wish it had another camera to show you what I'm doing in my MIDI keyboard, but if you have one, you will understand what I'm trying to say. Then your out level field, that's the master volume, so it's set up -3 dB, and you can just change it however you want, and obviously it's automatable, so that's good. Then the voices is just going to set the maximum number of notes that can be played simultaneously. So this is something, or this is a concept that's similar to what I explained in the AXX24 about that polyphony, right, and how long or how many notes can be played at the same time, right, and produce a sound, right. And then the chorus is just a detuner, so you can detune it and give it like a chorus effect and other stuff. It's not I'm not gonna say it's not important, but it gives you a couple of more fine-tuning options that you probably won't use. But either way, now let's start by moving some of this around real quick and start closing the tutorial to see how these parameters affect what I already have, if you remember how that was sounding. So the pitch is just that, right, the pitch. So nothing special, right. I'm gonna leave it there at 8 feet. By my waveforms, these are the different waveforms that I have to choose from. In my oscillator 1, I have a square, I have a sawtooth, I have a triangle, and I have a pulse, which is achieved by taking that squared and going from there to there. So that would be the amount of pulse that I would attain, like a more nasal sound. Let's listen to how that affects it. Nothing special. If I take a sawtooth, and right now they're being mixed, right? So maybe I should have done this. Taking my mix slider all the way up. And then my oscillator 2, which is very interesting because I have my normal square, and then I have another pulse that's 2 octaves, and that's why this little icon has like 2, right? So it's 2 octaves, and then I have 2 other variations of these 2 waveforms right here, and then I have or I should say I actually have 3 of those. So these 3 are variations of these 2. Then I have white noise. I have my external, which is gonna let me run an external Shannon strip via the side chaining, and that will create a lot of crazy possibilities, but can't talk too much about it because I haven't used it at all, never. So I just imagine what can be done, and then the office is going to turn it off completely. So let's take a listen how each one behaves. So notice this 2 octaves down, right? That's just the noise. This one sounds, honestly, it sounds the same, right? Like, there's not much difference really by themselves, but then the slider, I'm just gonna keep it mixed a little bit. I'm gonna leave it as let's see, let's leave it there. Let's leave some pulse, and yeah, let's leave it like that for now. So now let's see what the drive does. As I said, it's a very subtle change. Notice how that velocity or the level changed a little bit, but not much. Oh, you remember the cutoff and the resonance? Notice how I lose all of my low end pretty much when I use any of the classic slopes. If I go to fat, I gain it back. Just put the key all the way up, all the way down. So bring this up. Now is when I talk about the open close sliders, right? Very simple. What this means is that I will have an effect, or the range of the velocities is going to be affected inside this range. So any of the lower velocity notes is going to give me this much of the parameter. Anything all the way up at 127 is going to give me this much. So, and if I close it all the way, then any note is going to give me the maximum effect. And if I put it in the minus all the way down, then I pretty can't listen to anything because it's going to give me nothing on the level, right? there we have some modulation, right? We have some movement. There we don't have any movement, anything, everything's the same. And that goes exactly the same thing for the amplifier. Let's put it full all the way. Neighbors are gonna hate me. I'll just give it a little bit more attack. Slower the release, the sustain, or decay. Slower the decay. If I go to gate R, changes because now I'm dealing with release only. And dealing with one, right, like release only, doesn't mean that these are zero or non-existent. This just means that they're all the way up, but I can't do anything about it. And same with the A gate R, so I'm gonna leave it like that. I'm gonna give a little bit of glide. That's nice. That's a nice thing. So in the low frequency, you know, I have more waveforms like you have seen before. I'm just gonna change those waveforms. I'm gonna change the frequency a little bit. And I almost forget about these two sliders here. One is intensity by a wheel and then intensity by a velocity. And I can affect the intensity of the filter modulation by a velocity on all of them, but only by a wheel on the pitch pulse width, which is these, the mix, which is this slider, the cutoff and the resonance, which we know what they are, the volume, which is my amplifier, and then my filter FM and my low LFM amplitude, it's the LFO, I should say, the LFO amplitude, it's the LFO volume, and my filter frequency modulation, which is going to be tied to my modulation envelope by decay and attack using my modulation envelope. So many confusing terms, right? But intensity by a wheel, that's gonna be affected by your mod wheel in your MIDI instrument. So if you could see my MIDI keyboard, you would see that's the other knob that doesn't come back when you move it up or down. It can move up or down and stay there, and it can be automated and all that stuff. And then by a velocity, well, like most of the other synth controls, is just going to be affected by the velocity of the different notes that we have here. So let me demonstrate that velocity. So we start closing. Instead of using my MIDI keyboard, I'm just going to go to MIDI draw and go to modulation. Use my pencil. I'm just going to go crazy with some stuff here. Okay, let's take a listen to that. That's the maximum. That's off, because I am also affecting the pitch by a velocity. I have both on. And you see that any combination of the two is going to give me a different result. I don't know what you think about that, but I think that's pretty cool. That just shows you that you can create your own sounds with the synths that Logic has right out of the box. You know, it takes a little bit getting used to the different settings and understanding them, but I think and I hope I did a pretty good job of explaining in simpler terms how you can affect your waveform using the filter and the different parameters. And every other synth is just going to have more LFOs, or it's going to have more modulation envelopes. It's going to let you choose what you can alter the intensity of the modulation, of the LFO modulation, or your modulation envelope, you know, those type of things, you know. So if you get a good grasp of the ES1 and the ESM, there's no reason why you shouldn't be able to understand the upcoming ones, because it's more of the same, just arranged differently and with more or less. So, and look at it as you are creating a waveform, right, a sound, and then you're shaping it and altering it and sculpting it as you go through the other different parameters that you have at your disposal. So I don't know, with that I'm gonna close the tutorial, and just stay tuned for more synth videos upcoming. I'm gonna be talking synths until I'm pretty much through all of them, and then I'm gonna jump to something else. So thanks once again for watching, for supporting everything I'm doing. Make sure that you follow me on social media if you do not already do so. All the contact information is in the graphic below on the border of this video. The next video is gonna open a new round of the giveaway, and with that I'm gonna be closing it. So see you next time, and peace out, YouTube.